In this video, we're going to check out the latest game played by Hans Niemann. And Hans is on fire, 3.5 out of 4 in the Turkish League, playing extremely well, but many more games to go. In this video, we're checking his game against a young grandmaster from Azerbaijan, only 19 years old. His name is Aydin Suleymanliy. The two have played already quite a number of games against each other. The last one was won by Hans. It was a game played in Dubai earlier this year in May. And that game took 100 moves. It was an epic fight. And this game we are going to check out now is not different at all. It's a fascinating battle between two very young, ambitious grandmasters. You don't want to miss this game. Just one little favor, you can help the channel to grow by either hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, share it among your friends, turn on the notifications, of course, don't forget to do that. But also, you can drop a very nice little fee to my PayPal account. Really appreciate all the support, guys. It's really important to feel your support. So keep it coming. Thanks for that. And now we are going to check out the game. Suleymanli is playing with the white pieces. Hans is playing with black. And we get to see 1 e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, and knight f6. The 4 knights opening. And this was interestingly seen in an earlier game, this event, by Hans. He played with the black pieces also against a compatriot of Suleymanli. In that game, we checked out the move d4. It's the Scotch 4 knights. Fascinating game it was. This time we are going to see the Spanish 4 knights. Bishop b5, putting pressure against the knight, intending to take it and maybe win the pawn on e5. Interesting move here. Black has various ways of playing here. Bishop d6 is a popular move, has been seen in the last 10 years or so. Looks very anti-positional. Why? Because you put your bishop on a square that you cannot push your other central pawn, which means that the bishop on c8 cannot be developed yet, and that will also hinder the development of the rook on a8. White played the move d3, black goes for a6, hoping that white is going to take so that you can take back away from the center with your d-pawn, enabling the bishop to be developed. But white is not interested in that exchange. Played here the move bishop a4, castling kingside by both sides, pretty known stuff. And here the move h6 to prevent the bishop ever coming to g5 and putting up pressure against that knight on f6. Now white played interesting move a3. You may wonder, what is the idea of this move? Well, if you ever go b5, then after bishop b3, if you attack the bishop with knight a5, the bishop can always drop back to a2. It's very thematical idea. This light squared bishop is usually very important piece. Well, instead of b5, black played the move rook e8. The bishop comes to e3. Bishop f8. This is part of black's strategy to drop back with the bishop. The rook replaces the bishop, supporting the pawn on e5. And here the bishop comes to b3. So you see the bishop and knight together with the support of the pawn. They are nicely controlling the d5 square. And that's going to play a very important role in the upcoming middle game. Black played the move d6. White played h3 to prevent bishop g4 ideas. And now the bishop goes to e6. Bishop takes e6. And as always, interesting moment, how to recapture. You may consider taking back with the f-pawn, but in these structures with double pawns on the e-file, you would rather have your rook on the f-file. So it's a small positional concession if you do take with your f-pawn in this way. In the game, Niemann decided to take with the rook. And that's also very understandable because he's just one move away from breaking free in the center with the move d5. If you can get in that move, you can nicely activate your queen, your rook. Black is rock solid in that case. But knight e5, that is the key move with the point that knights cannot be exchanged here. If you do so, then you take back with the pawn and it wins a piece. So rather than taking on d5, black went back with the rook to e8. The rook has done its job. And now you're intending to take on d5 without the white giving a chance to attack the rook on e6. Now white goes c4. This is the main idea. Nice play. Pawns are placed on light squares. White has the better bishop. Bishop on f8 is quite passive. So I think white is doing absolutely fine here. Knight d7, avoiding the exchange anytime soon. And the point is that after the move b4, white is grabbing space on the queen side. Black goes for knight e7. Now you understand, with the knight on f6, white had the chance to take now and ruin the structure. That's why the knight is on d7. The other one is on e7. Rook e1 played. Black goes for the move c6. And is white going to exchange knights or not? It is possible to do that, but I think considering the lack of space, black would be relieved to see some exchanges coming in. And therefore, instead, Suleymanli played the move knight c3. I like that decision to keep pieces on the board. And, I mean, black is still solid, but his position is quite cramped. I mean, these knights, they're restricting the mobility of the pieces behind them. Knight g6 was played in the game. And now after queen b3, white continues developing. I feel that Hans is choosing the wrong plan here, but I'm not sure how bad it is. It's actually quite playable move. He goes for knight h4. I would have preferred to see this move, queen f6, with the idea to come in to the f4 square. I believe that the knight is better off on f4, because after knight h4, you have the option now to exchange knights. But here again, white avoids the exchange of pieces, goes here for the move knight h2. Very interesting move with the point of getting in g3 at some point. Now, queen f6 was played anyway, but as I said, I would have preferred to see the knight being placed on a more central square. You can understand that with the threat of a move like queen g6, with mate coming in, the queen goes back to d1. Mysterious move, but white is still having everything under control. First of all, the queen can come over to g4, but if black were here about to play the move queen g6, the best move in fact is to play g3. You're not really threatening to take the knight yet, but the knight is stranded at the edge of the board. And the main threat here for white is to get out of the pin, to set up the threat to take that knight on h4. But therefore, queen g6 is not such a good move. Queen e6 was played, and now the queen comes to g4. White is offering the exchange of queens, hitting the knight. The knight is not doing great there. If you take on g4, there are plans to take back with the h-pawn, so you have double pawns, but it's quite useful because with moves like g3, king g2, maybe f4 at some point, or just go g5, white is trying to build up the pressure on the king side. Well, black didn't go for it. Played here the move knight g6, queen takes e6. Once again, how to recapture either with the rook. Looks very, very solid, still quite passive. Hans is an active player. He decided to take back with the f-pawn, so that he is controlling even better the d5 square, with possible ideas to play the move d6, d5 at some point himself. Now, important move, g3. Why this is such an important move? Just to dominate that knight on g6, never allowing it to come into f4 from where it can hit the pawn on d3. So the pawn on g3 is quite useful. Now, black played rook ec8. Mysterious rook move. What is Hans's idea? Well, very simple. He wants to go d5 and he hopes that the c file will be opened. So the rook is then eyeballing the knight on c3. That is interesting idea, but look at this. White also played rook ec1, so the d5 pawn break has been prevented. I mean, white is controlling that square with two pawns and a knight, so that doesn't work. And well, hard to say what black should do. I mean, I think black is still okay if you look for counterplay with something like a5, but instead they followed the move knight e7. You can see that black was certainly not satisfied with the placement of that knight on g6, but on e7 it's hardly any better. Look at what happens now. White goes for the move c5. This is an excellent positional move as it tickles the pawn on d6. Once the pawn on d6 is gone, the pawns on e6 and e5, they become more vulnerable. For instance, if you do take on c5, you take back with the b pawn, and this is an interesting pawn formation. These pawns are really weak, and white has a simple plan to put a knight on a4. Double rooks on the b file. There's this backward pawn on b7, and there are other ideas as well, like you can try to improve your knight coming over to the queen side. White is having a dream position in this case, and black will have this long-term problem of how to defend the pawn weaknesses in the middle of the board. So rather than taking on c5, Hans played the move d5, threatening to set up a double attack against the two minor pieces on c3 and e3. Therefore, the knight comes to a4. Good move, knight g6. Hey, the knight is back again. Why is that the case? Well, you're trying to activate the bishop. So the bishop can move, but the knight is not happy on the g6 square. And, well, you got to think of what black really wants to do here. So there are always these ideas to consider a move like a5. White played very nice rook move, rook a b1. All these 16 pawns are still on the board, but you can see how important these rook moves are. So with the move rook b1, you're anticipating the move a5. It can be met by b5, and white is taking over control on the b file, ready to double and invade on that file. So a5, not a good idea. What else can black do? If you go d4, then bishop d2 is a good move with plans of rerouting the knight to c4 to attack the pawn on e5. There are weaknesses in black's position anyway. You can improve the knight. You can even shift the attention to the king side, trying to get in the move f4. But white is in the driver's seat here. So black is just going to make some waiting moves now. Bishop e7. Possibly at some point there is this idea to go bishop g5 and offer the exchange of dark squared bishops. That would at least enlighten the pressure a bit, but very understandable. Again, a nice prophylactical move, h4, covering that square. So black doesn't get a chance to trade off pieces here. Rook f8, king g2, also good move. Knight f6, black is moving his pieces to the king side. But there is the move f3, just to protect the pawn on e4 one more time. Excellent move. And the bishop comes over to d8 to guard the b6 square. Now, basically only one piece is not doing too great. It's the knight on h2. So what I'm thinking here is knight f1, getting the knight around, for instance, to the queen side. Maybe even knight a5 at some point, or maybe knight b6. And if you do take on b6, cb6, you also can jump with your knight to the c5 square, attacking weaknesses on b7 and e6. I think in such close positions, it's possible to play in such a way. But Suleymanli played here differently. He went for knight g4. But that also gives black the chance here to trade off on g4, which is what Hans didn't do. It's interesting. He had a different idea. We will discuss it in a bit. But in this case, if you go for this plan with rook f7, then you finally have the possibility of putting your knight on a decent square on d7, where it defends the pawn on e5, it guards the b6 square. You move the bishop, and then you double rooks on the f file. Pieces are getting swapped, and black should be able to hold on. But it's not what Hans wanted. Hans played here knight h5. Why does he put that knight at the side of the board? Remarkable decision, but I guess he is contemplating potential sacrifices, including bishop takes h4, and then you get at least 2 pawns for the piece, and you can capture with a knight on h4 with check, hit the pawn on f3, so maybe you can get a third pawn as well. So I still think that Hans is playing with the aim of generate some trouble on the king side. But with the next move, all these plans are no longer possible. Knight b6 is a good move, very nice transformation of advantages, because you hit the rook on a8. Black is basically forced to take, because if you go rook b8, it's knight e7, and it's a knight fork. White is winning the exchange. You don't want to put the rook on a7, then it's out of play for the remainder part of the game. So bishop takes b6, c takes b6 played, but here you can see these sacrifices are no longer possible. The bishop is no longer there. So I think the knights are just awfully misplaced on g6 and h5. Look at this. Rook a8 played, and now white goes for the move a4. Very good move with the aim of trying to break through on the queen side with the move b4, b5. Now, black could have taken on e4, which he didn't do. But the open d file is absolutely useless. I mean, white can go for this line with rook d1, and after rook fd8, trying to maintain control. This is just a very nice illustration of what potentially goes wrong for black. Because now knight f2 is an excellent move. You cannot take the bishop as it hangs the rook on d8. If all the rooks are coming off the board, then this knight is on its way to b2, then to d3, hit the pawn, but most importantly, it will come to c5, hit the pawn on b7 and the pawn on e6. And maybe black is in time to defend here, but these knights are really far away, and it's like long-term pressure. Even the pawn on a6 can potentially be hanging with potential ideas of creating a passed pawn. So you understand that black cannot make use of an open file. Played here rook a8, white goes for rook c2, rook f7 was played, and now finally it's the move b5. This is an excellent move. After cb5, ab5, you see that if black is going to take one more time, you take back with the rook with tremendous pressure, and it's good to have the rook already on the second rank, because here the rook cannot come to a2 to give a check and generate counterplay. Well, in this case, after rook takes b5, I think black's position is falling apart with too many weaknesses to cover. So black instead played here, instead of taking twice, he only captured once on b5 and then pushed the pawn to a5. Looking for counterplay, but look at this. Boom! Bishop takes h6 out of the blue. A bishop sacrifice with the point that if you accept it, you take with the knight, and after the king goes away, you take the rook, you enter with your own rook on the 7th, and after king f6, you take on b7 and the b pawn. Together with the support of the two rooks, it should just be decisive. Once again, the knights are totally out of play. So you can't really take the bishop. So white is just winning a pawn here. Black pushes the a pawn, the bishop goes away. Just keep it simple. You don't want to keep calculating whether black is able to capture the bishop or not. Rook back to f8, connecting the rooks. But here the knight comes to e3, attacking the pawn on d5. If you push the pawn, the knight comes to c4, hits the pawn again, and on the next two moves, white is gonna pick up the pawn on a4. White will be up 2 pawns at least. So that's also not a solution for black. They follow the move a3. Desperate counterplay, but white is taking a second pawn. Very, very nice move. I should actually point out that with the bishop on g5, there was even no way of defending the pawn any longer. That's why a3 was played, and then white can capture twice. Rook a4, rook a2, stopping the pawn. Knight comes back to f6. Bishop takes, nice transformation. I mean, you're improving black structure, but this time you are already 2 pawns up. h5 is an excellent move. The knight is caught, cannot really move anywhere apart from the h8 square. But then it's rook b3, and here the pawn is gone. If you defend it with a rook a8, you can at least take the pawn on f6. So black goes for rook d4, attacking the knight. White can take the pawn on a3 anytime, but first the knight got to be saved, of course. Knight e7 check, king f7, knight f5, attacking the rook on d4. The rook goes away, and here you take another pawn, and you see that white all of a sudden is just 3 pawns up. The knight is badly placed. I mean, white does have a number of weak pawns, but still there are extra pawns, and white has no trouble converting it. King e6, g4, defending the knight, knight f7, rook a7, targeting the pawn, rook b8, rook c3, excellent move. You're not caring about that pawn on b5, because then the rook will come in to c7, hitting this pawn, and if you take on b6, Suleymanli's idea is here to give a check, and after king d5 you pick up the knight. So that is a nice little line which was calculated. You see that with the rook on c7 there is this deadly threat to take either on b7 or e7. Knight d6 was played in the game, but now cute finish, knight g7 check. Black resigned because of this line. King f7, king gotta go back to the 7th rank. Rook c7 check, king gotta go to the back rank, and then the h pawn comes in as well. If you ever take on b5, it's knight h5, and you're taking the pawn on f6 with check. Like, let's say rook takes b6, rook g7 is a convincing move. If you go king f8, then h7 is there with the plan of giving a check on g8 or to promote a pawn. And if you go with your king in the other direction, let's say king h8, there is knight takes f6. So there's a deadly mating attack here. So after knight g7, Hans Niemann lost his first game in the Turkish League. And now he is back to reality. He needs to bounce back in the next couple of rounds to make sure that he's going to win some rating this event, but of course, just for himself, for honor. You would like to win games anyway, not only for rating. So, well, let me know in the comments, what do you think of this game? I thought it was a very impressive game by Suleymanli. And it's one of those young guys. We will hear more from him in the near future. Super talented player. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more action. And we will see each other very soon again. Bye bye.